it's really difficult because even if you think about let's say something as popular as a Star Wars franchise, and then how many people actually go and buy the Star Wars art book? And now you think about you yourself and you want to make an art book of your own IP. Like how many people are actually going to be interested? Right. So it's a very, very tricky thing. But you're absolutely right though. Yeah, I think I never thought about it that way, where when you're starting out, especially when you're younger, you never think about an IP. What are you talking about? Like getting a job and paying my bills is the only thing that you want. Um, yeah, I wonder why though. I wonder why like a lot of artists, if not most of them, work for an X amount of time and they all reach almost a similar conclusion. I think there's right, like there's part of it. I think part of it is that we put in quite a lot of ourselves into our art, and then we can't help it but to put it into our professional work as well. But then when you get reminded that those work are not for you, those are for your clients, I think that drive to be like, you know what, I want to make something that's just mine. I think that drives our, gets stronger and stronger.
Please welcome today's guest, Steve Wang. Steve is a phenomenal concept artist who has delivered stellar work on a ton of huge projects, ranging from Gears 5 to Neil Blomkamp's old studios, plus many more. And he also shares his workflow in our Learnsquared course, Concept Art Hacks, which is available now. In this wide-ranging episode, Steve shares how the pandemic has affected him as an artist and gives us an introspection into his 8 years as a professional, how he has evolved in that time, and where the industry is going next. I had great fun speaking to Steve in this episode. Buckle up and let's go. Cool. Let's get going. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Learnsquared podcast. And in this episode, we welcome the swangtastic Steve Wang. Hey Steve.
Hey man, funny name. Cool.
How's it going?
Pretty good. Thank you for inviting me to the podcast. It's been a while since I've been on any kind of podcast. I've been kind of taking a social media, I guess you can call it a break.
Mm-hmm.
But,
very wise.
Yeah, it's really good to be back. Actually, just kind of talking about art, and recently I've been kind of finding a little bit of that motivation again to really push hard. Yeah, so it's good to be back.
So how was that? How long's your hiatus from the World Wide Web been?
I would say since the start of with the start of the pandemic, actually. I kind of took a break.
Pretty much a full year.
Yeah, pretty much a full year. I didn't really post anything, and it all started at first because of work. I was taking on multiple projects, and it's like, you know what, I'll start doing stuff when I have time. And then it kind of turned to like, wow, like what's going on with the world? I'm not sure what's happening. And I realized something is that I'm a sprint type of worker where I can work very, very, very long hours for maybe, let's say 2 or 3 months, and then I will need to take a break. And usually in the past, like that is in the form of maybe like a vacation to visit my family or a few days off and just like a weekend getaway. And then usually I do like a once a year trip to like a new country with like my friends that I went to school with. Yeah, so that was like such a huge, not only like a little, like a carrot at the end of the stick. For me, it was also like a good recharge for motivation and all that stuff. And just without that, I was finding it to be just kind of, like, what am I doing this for? Yeah. So I just kind of took a break. Yeah.
That's quite interesting. And I've started to discover that myself a little bit as I get on with just progressing in, not just art and life, just career, but life as well. That, I find myself, I can be super productive at times, and then I can find myself super not productive. And what you just mentioned then, I can totally relate to that in terms of like working in sprints. Like, as much as I hate to admit it, I think I do prefer working to like a deadline and having something to do, as opposed to like having something that can be done whenever you need to. Because especially when you got a lot of stuff going on, like you said, multiple contracts and what have you. It's easy to just put that to one side.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's been quite eye opening, and trying to like navigate that. So in terms of when you like like you said, you like to work in sprints and then you have your break. Was that something you knew like was that one of the reasons what caused you to maybe take a step back from? Was that just social media alone, or was it taking a step back from like art? And by just to confirm, when you mentioned that you took basically a hiatus from social media, was that just
Mm.
generally like social media as a whole, or more like in terms of personal art? Like, how do you use social media for
Oh,
yourself anyway?
it's mainly not posting because I used to be pretty active. Like
Hmm.
I was trying to do either just kind of small studies and paintings,
Right.
or sometimes I'll spend a week or two on a personal piece and doing that. And I've
Mm.
always kind of trying to work towards like a book or something that I've been working on for a
Yes.
while. And yeah, and then that's just yeah, I think it's just kind of taking a break from all of that. I started to notice that it's affecting me just kind of negatively.
Mm.
And I think part of it is not even just a pandemic. It's part of it is just because, first of all, like I think social media, like it just kind of makes you think that everybody else is really, they're doing really well.
Mm.
But that's not the hardest part for me. I think the hardest part for me is that there was a lot of different goals. I guess you can see, like for example, let's say Ash will post something, and you're like, wow, like he's been really going on about those car renders, right?
Hmm.
So you're like, wow, maybe I should pick up V-Ray, or
Hmm. Yeah.
maybe I should learn like how does he model and texture and light to that. Like I know how he's so good at photography, so then he's able to get renders like that. But then maybe I should start learning that. And then
Yeah.
Mache will come up with something, and then Jama, and then, like some people will just start throwing stuff out, and they're all like masters of their own
Mm.
workflow, right? So then as somebody who's slightly younger than them in the industry, I'm like, oh shit, maybe I should follow them. I should
Hmm.
follow. But then like once you're trying to follow all of them and learning everything, you really don't have time to to even get proficient with one of
Yeah.
them. Once that goes, so that the break is like part of it is that is like kind of taking a step back
Hmm.
and just like what is it that I need for like my workflow and
Right.
my goals. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I mean, do you reckon the pandemic, like if the pandemic never happened, you still would have probably taken a break in one way or another?
Mm, maybe not, because I think
Mhm.
I might have been able to distract myself with
Ah, okay.
the usual, like I'm just gonna go out or I'm just gonna do my vacation stuff and then be like, you know what, I can push hard. But
Mhm.
now it's like after I push hard in personal work or real freelance work, you're kind of like left alone and you kind of sit there like, okay, like what is it? You get more time to think, I
Mm.
guess, in this situation that we've been having for the past year.
And like, but is that time? So yeah, so you've taken a break. You've kind of
Yeah.
like drift. I guess you could say like was it like abrupt thing? Was it more like drifted away from the usual kind of workflow? I guess a lot of it was abrupt because of the nature of the pandemic and like how things have just quickly shut down. Like you mentioned, you couldn't
Yeah.
do your typical. Basically, your flow was ruined. Like you said, you like to work, carry the end of the
Yeah.
stick, then have your break,
Yeah.
and then come back to it. Um, but like, just fast forward to today, looking
Mhm.
back at it in terms of on a personal note, how has that break helped or affected or even changed anything? And yeah, actually, yeah, let's remember that. Like, how do you how has it affected you since?
Man, that's a great question, and that's a hard hitting question too.
Mm.
I would say I think I'm a little bit more clear on not what to learn, but what not to learn. I guess
Mhm.
I was doing quite a bit of exploration when it comes to let's say different 3D software or
Mm.
different rendering packages and stuff like that, right? Trying to push it to the next level,
Mhm.
and then I guess by taking that long break and kind of just hitting a lot of walls, as well as or I should say lack of personal work,
Mhm.
as well as doing quite a bit of professional work during this time. I just thought like, oh man, there's a lot of stuff that I was trying to learn that is not going to help me reach my final goal.
Mhm.
I guess let's put it that way. Like for example, let's just say personally, I liked my painting to be more painterly, right? Okay. So if I like my paint to be more painterly, why is it that I am learning how to do the most realistic shaders, or why am I trying to learn how to sculpt the most realistic rocks, or using super refined like CAD modeling software to do my hard surface stuff? But I mean, there's a lot of benefits to that for sure, and there's also a drawback, and I can mention that after this. But yeah, like there's all that stuff that I'm doing that I realize, man, that's not going to help me get to where I want. That might help me get more jobs, right? That might help me get more jobs. But I also think that going the other way is also going to get me jobs as well, right? So then I started to kind of do some research and seeing like, okay, like if this, let's say like a Craig Mullins or like a Jamie Jones, if that's the type of work that I really want to achieve one day, let's say give me like 10, 15 years or whatever, then I think I should do what they did. And, I think a lot of these more like traditional artist type guys, they like to talk about how like drawing is the most important thing, and how like, oh, you should learn what good shape and good form looks like in like in nature, and as well as in like figure drawing and stuff like that. So I think, oh man, that's something that I should probably get into, and I have been, here and there. So, and that's been actually a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah. And like, do you think a lot of that comes down to the abundance of maybe the accessibility of tools? Because on one hand, it's like, let's say growing up, in the age of when like graphics was like computer games and films, it was very primitive, and then since I guess Jurassic Park, it kind of exploded. And then just in terms of a consumer, and this is from my perspective, you started getting like fascinated more by, oh wow, look how realistic this has become, because it used to look like this from before. And then it kind of turned into, where it's probably the last decade, maybe even 15 years or so, where everyone's been so like saturated with like CGI, and they're kind of immune to it, that magic of it now. And then it's kind of lost its appeal in that way. Do you think one of the reasons what you're referring to before regarding like learning multiple different things, and then obviously trying to align it to a goal, like I mentioned before, like with the films and stuff, before it used to be like complete magic, like there was never real answers, or even it's hard for a normal person who's not in the industry comprehend like how this kind of stuff was done.
Right.
Whereas perhaps in the last 5 years or more, it's like the concept artist is somewhat known. Like even people who don't like participate in art or practice art, but they're kind of like film nerds or nerds of the entertainment industry. They're familiar with what a concept artist does, what a VFX artist does, and all that kind of stuff. And then pushing it forward to what we do, it's like, whereas before you would start off maybe like sketching, and then maybe you picked up Photoshop, and then seeing what like someone did regarding After Effects or ZBrush, all these kind of things, like, wow, look at that, that's complete magic. And then now it's almost like, oh, I'm only 2 clicks away from figuring out at least how they did it. Do you think that's probably one of the drawbacks of just the plethora of like knowledge that's out there right now?
Right. Yeah, I think well, what do you think? I mean,
I always wrestle with this, and on one hand, like I'm going through a similar kind of, I wouldn't say journey, but it's like a struggle of trying to resist just trying to do loads of like trying to learn loads of different techniques, even if I'm only going to use it probably like 0.1% of the time. I do get seduced by the fact of like, oh, if I know how to do it, that'll be cool. And then like I can use it once in a while, and sometimes just I get a kick out of like I enjoy basically learning stuff. Like sometimes the commercial side of things, and like you mentioned, goals, like that's completely out the window. It's like, oh, like Houdini looks fun, and look at this crazy shit you can do, and I'd love to just even toy with that and figure it out. But then like now it's like similar to yourself, I fell into that at the beginning of, like, say, my art journey, where in the space of a couple of years, I realized I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I flipped between trying to learn visual effects to modeling to sculpting to back to
Yeah.
sketching, and all that kind of stuff, flip flopping here, there, and everywhere. And that's kind of mimicking what you were experiencing. And whereas before that, when I was at university and what have you, all I ever used was like a pencil and pen, and just
Yeah.
tried to figure out design and art and all that kind of stuff that way. And looking at my 1-year-old now, how she's growing up, I can empathize and see similarities in terms of when she's got, like, say, 50 different toys in front of her, and she goes from one to the other in a matter of seconds and not knowing which one to play with. And then it ends up being a big mess and we have to clean it up. That's kind of what I feel like with maybe just messing around with too many tools sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my take on it.
No, I think I 100% agree with you. And like, bring it to what you said, like back then when concept art or even this industry was relatively unknown, right? Like even when I was coming up, my family, my parents, like nobody, even the younger generation, nobody has ever heard of this, right? And now it's getting to a point where it's actually like a pretty common, like a concept artist or like a visual effects artist or a 3D artist. Like these are pretty much like commonly well-known job titles, right? I remember like watching a anime last year at the start of the pandemic, and it's called "Keep Your Hands Off Ezoken," I think, and it's actually
Okay.
really interesting because the main it was I just googled like, hey, top top anime of like 2020 or 2019 or something, and that was the number one or number two.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, interesting. Let me read about it first because the style is very interesting. And then the main character, it's a girl, and it's actually she's a concept artist or she's an aspiring
Really?
concept artist.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, this I can't believe it. Usually, they're
We've made
you're
it
either
into being
fighting or
protagonists.
exactly you're
Yeah.
and one and the other one is an animator, and then she like the main character, she loves designing sets and props, and then her partner, like the animator, she loves doing humans and poses, and somehow they go through this adventure of trying to make their own
Yeah.
I guess short film club at school. Yeah, it's really interesting, and it kind of brings me back to the time where I started. And like you said, like you just have pen and paper because that's kind of what they have. Actually, they have an iPad, but like
Mhm.
just pen and paper, and they start thinking like, oh, they're in all the scenes, right? They'll be like drawing this and be like, what do you guys think about that? And the way that the director filmed it was really interesting too, because instead of showing what's on paper, it shows that they're actually physically in the scene
Mm.
of the movie or whatever they're designing. And then they'd be like, oh, but that doesn't make any sense. How would that do? And then the main girl will be like, oh, you know what? You're right. Well, then I should add a handle here, and I should add
Mm.
some warning sign. You know what? Let's get some thrusters so to balance it off. And it's really unrealistic for a kid of whatever their age, they're probably like 10 or
Mhm.
11, to have that kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting. And then I'm just kind of bringing that's what design is. Like that's what
Yeah.
made it so fun in the beginning. Yeah, and then I think right now when I'm doing a lot of client work, especially that involves like I said, multiple software packages for me to learn and stuff like that. I don't feel that way,
Mm.
and I think right now, like my own, I'm not sure it's a tip for people who are listening, but like this is how I approach it. Like when I'm working with a new client, right? I try to see what their expectations are.
Mm.
And you have to be very careful with it because let's say, Aaron, like you know a lot of different methods of working. If you show your client too much, the thing
Mhm.
is they might be attached to one of them, like, oh, Aaron, your modeling is so good. Can you please model this? But in your back of your head, you're like, no, but I really want to just sketch
Yeah.
out and
Yeah. Yeah.
design this thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so I try to when I start a project and work with a new art director, I really try to poke at like, hey, what can I do? How much can I get away with while doing what I want?
Mm. Yeah.
Yes, that's
That's true.
yeah.
Maybe it's like the other way around as well with clients. It's like, or even just um, companies in general. I guess it's like the feeling is perhaps mutual. It's like ideally they wouldn't need to hire anybody because they'd have everything they need, and they can just pull out what they want to do. But it's that little weird dance between, like client and the artist, and so, and I guess like the relationship between, if it's great things can happen, which we've seen, like, like a great project always stands out. But like just touching upon that, in fact, is like, do you make a conscious effort of when you work with a client and you want to do a project, like, do you, in your own head at least, have like limitations of, okay, I'm only going to use this particular workflow on this, or does it really depend on the problem? Or actually, does it change each time?
It does change each time, and I do like to switch it up. For example, like the project I've been on for the past, like 8 months or so, like there are days where I'm like, you know what, I'm so tired of doing all these 3D. So I'm just gonna sketch up on my iPad and see what he says. And then it turns out like he the current art director I'm working with, he's like, oh, okay, cool. Like I can give you direction based on these. Sketches are fine. But the other side is that, like, because over time I've shown that, okay, yeah, like there are certain things that, like things like guns, like small handheld props, it is a lot, I guess, more efficient for me to just do it in, let's say, Moy 3D or Fusion 360. I would do that, and then it has kind of giving them the impression that, like, oh, I love doing that. So then sometimes, like, I will get thrown tasks where it's a lot bigger than just a prop. It's like, hey, can you give us a very detailed 3D model of like a robot or like a car or something? Like, well, I probably can if I really spend time, but it's number A is I've never done it, and B, it's just not something I want to do. Like spending a month on modeling out a robot or something. Yeah.
How do you like, in that situation, how do you get through it? Because obviously with anything, especially like even just life in general, there are sometimes, like, let's take house chores for example. It's got to get done, but at the same time you do not want to do it. You know what I mean? So it's like, like sometimes when you got responsibility, it's like, okay, I got to do it. We'll get it done, and then it's over. Like, how do you get yourself through that in that situation when it comes to client work?
Yeah, it's tricky because they're actually paying you, right? And then supposedly they're paying you whatever rate you want. So it's supposedly it should be pretty well. But I think, like, I try to just be upfront about it. Like, hey, it's just not something that I'm not very good at it, and B, I'm not into it. And like, is it possible for me to, especially something that's like a completely different discipline, right? For example, let's say if they wanted me to go from designing a robot to designing, let's say, an environment, I'll be like, you know what, it's design and it's work. I can do it. But if you're like, can you learn a 3D package, or can you package so far to a point where you're doing a fully complete 3D model of a hard asset, then I will be like, you know what, like, I don't think that's something that I want to spend that much time on. And is that okay with you? And I think for the most part, in my experience so far, they've been pretty okay with it. If I'm upfront about it, like, it's better that than spending 3 weeks or something and then turning out something that they don't want.
So like communication is obviously key then, right, in that situation?
Yeah. And my assumption is that, like, they never hire me in the beginning because I can do highly detailed finished 3D model. They probably just discovered that, you know what, you can probably do it because you've been handing in these props that are 3D models. So why don't you do it? So I don't think,
I guess, like, so I should jump in on that, but just to like, I guess, like, a lot of these jobs, they're not in terms of long in a normal job sense, like where you with your boss or your like your employees and colleagues day in day out almost forever. And it's like, like, perhaps it's more, unless you work with clients like for years and years and years, and there's a familiarity and everyone knows each other's like shorthand and all that kind of stuff, then what everyone's capable of. But perhaps it's more, a lot of clients just putting the feelers out, seeing, okay, what can we, like, what's the most we can get out of this situation, and then like take advantage of that perhaps.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So but then in that case, so like you mentioned, personal work does come in handy in that case, because if you are working on, say, weaponry, pure weaponry and you've done that for like 3 weeks straight or 3 months straight.
Yeah.
Personal work does give you that opportunity to, release some steam and do something completely opposite and completely out there.
Yeah.
But then, like you mentioned, you've done multiple contract works in one go. So that can get quite tough, I guess, when there's literally no time left to do anything.
Yeah, no time left. So then I guess the main goal here is to make sure that like my client work is almost just like my personal work. Right. But then obviously that gets into the whole like how much attachment should you have to especially your client work. Because chances are like 9 times out of 10, they're going to ask for changes that maybe you personally don't agree with.
Yeah.
So then like that gets a little dangerous. But then I try to make sure that I'm trying as hard as I can, like, right, to make sure that the result that I provide to my professional work is the same, if not better, than what I want for my personal work. And I feel like that makes my day go by a little easier. Right. I'm not sitting there like, oh shit, when am I going to get off work? I'm so tired of this. Right. It's just like, hey, you know what? It's almost like I'm doing my own personal painting and then send it to them. If they like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't.
Yeah. And it's like, and I think that's the perfect attitude to have. Just in any professional situation across the board, let alone just art. Like in a similar, I'm not as experienced as yourself. But in a similar situation, when it comes to clients, it's like when they ask me to do something, whatever it is, I would work on it like it is for myself. Obviously, when there's like changes and what have you, you just gotta negotiate that, and more so just try and like get the best possible piece for them. But then there's other things like, but then you don't get a shot perhaps, or it doesn't make it through, so then no one ever will see it and what have you. But it's like treating clients in that particular way, and just treating work in that particular way, I think is wise in general, because and just for anyone listening who's maybe trying to break into the industry and thinking, what should it be like, with any job you get, there will be, I guess, frustrations and things that maybe go a different way that you don't want them to go in that particular way.
Yes.
But I guess it's more damaging to be, maybe disrespectful is the wrong word to use, but maybe just like disregard what the client wants, and maybe, I don't know, like let your ego get in the way and all that kind of stuff. Because especially if, maybe not even just for freelancers, even people in studios, it's a small industry, and if word gets around that, whether you're difficult or not, if that's how it comes across, then in terms of money that can hurt you, in terms of reputation that can hurt you, and then like job satisfaction is probably one of the things you can't really put a price on, but it's one of the things that I personally believe people should strive for, because being happy in your job is like, it's really good for the mental health, it's really good for like just personal well-being in general, and just feeling proud in what you do, and disrupting that can really I guess completely damage that, and maybe the career that you dream of, completely ruin it from the get-go. Have you heard any horror stories in that regard?
Yeah, of course. I was just about to say, like, I think for anyone who, maybe you're looking to start out in the industry, or you're in the first few years, and man, I think, okay, like I might be one of the better persons to speak about this, because I've definitely been in that position where I do let my ego get in the way.
Okay.
And then I've kind of worked on it over the years, and thankfully I've had like really good art directors. Some of them are not even artists. Some of them are, honestly more like, managers, producers, and they'll kind of pull me into a room and be like, hey, like, oh, why is it that you say that? And then is it because like you want to get this point across? But is it that important that you get that point across, right?
That's
And
wise.
I'll be like, oh, okay. Yeah, and it's really, and I'm like, you know what, you're right. Like, and he'd be like, oh, does it really matter? Like, does it really matter in the grand scheme of things if that is done that way or not? I'm like, you know what, like, you're probably right. Like, and then at the end of the day, it's such a like, for something that a concept artist like me will work on, even if it's like a spaceship, it's so, I guess in a game or in film, it's one thing. It's one thing that, you know what, like if we just all just compromise and just make the work life, everyday life smoother, I don't think it's I think it's worth, it's worth it sacrificing a little bit. Yeah, yeah. But I also think that you should, when you're working with new clients, you should definitely you kind of just like poke at it a little bit, like try different way of expressing your opinion. Because I think in the beginning of the industry or beginning of your jobs, um, it's very, very easy to fall into the I'm working for you, right? I'm working. I mean, you are like if they're paying you, right? I'm working for you, therefore, like your wish is my command, kind of mentality, right? And then I think as you kind of work, a little bit more and more, gain more experience, and also just meeting more art directors, you kind of realize that no, no, like I think, especially in this industry, most people that are hired are experts in their own field. So versus I'm working for you, it's better to have the mentality that I'm working with you. But your job is to manage all these different artists and give us feedback. And then some people they will manage the story. Some people they'll oversee the entire studio and make sure everything is done on time. And my job is to come up with this one design that you give me to do today, and that's it, right? And you can express that, like you can be like, okay, well, like I know what I'm talking about when it comes to this. And this is exactly why, and always be very logical, right? Don't be because I like it or because that I designed it. No, it's because the handle has to be that way or should be that way, because A, B, and C. And what do you think? Right. And then also, like, I will say, try to always argue from their perspective as well. Like, oh, it should be this way. But if you want it that way, I think it could work and I think it will look really cool. But I think the 3D department might have a problem with this or that. Like it might be geoclash or whatever. Right. And then it kind of gives them, you're kind of thinking for them and let them make the decision because ultimately they are making the decision. Yeah.
How long did it take you to, I guess, not develop that skill because it's not so much a skill, but like come to that understanding, that realization of, like get how to get your point across and dealing with clients? Was that something that was quite turbulent at the beginning? Was it a struggle or was it something that you just like, naturally eased into and it was like a duck to water type situation?
Yeah. I mean, it's been something that I was working on for because like even for just a little story like for my first ever like job or a freelance job I didn't even get paid because I got into a clash with the client. So
Wow.
yeah, like it was pretty bad in the beginning because there's a particular way I want to do things, and then
Right.
especially when it comes to like in the beginning they really don't pay you at all. Like then very, very little money. So in the back of your head you're kind of thinking like, oh man, like I'm working I'm working through my holidays, or I think that
Yeah.
time I was working through because I'm from Taiwan and we take our Chinese New Year break very seriously
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
there. Everybody gets like a week off or something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I was like on a holiday out of town. And I brought my laptop because I knew I had to do
Yeah.
it. So I was already in a bad mood and all that stuff. And over the years, I've met clients that didn't have the same mindset, or I guess they didn't go through like the whole realizing you should compromise that process. So it becomes really, really hard when you work with people who they don't give you a reason. They just want it that way and that's it. Right. And those are have been like really, really difficult for me. Yeah. But I'll say it took like 5 or 6 years.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
And how long have you been in the industry now?
I think I've been working maybe like eight
Hey,
years.
wow,
Yeah.
that's run, man.
And
Um,
I think it's probably also because I've swapped jobs so often
mhm.
that I had the fortune of working with just like all walks of life.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That
So
that
then like
is the
it
best.
is the best, and
Yeah.
especially when you're kind of learning dealing with people and different personality type. Because I think if you're staying at one studio for let's say 10 years, you kind of learn to deal with your art director and your producer
Yeah.
and your team. But then there's actually a lot of other type of people out there.
Mm. It's
Yeah.
like, to use an analogy, it's like immunity. The people who, like, say, live in nature or work on farms, for example, they tend to
Yeah.
have a stronger immune system than someone who lives and works in a city. Just
Yes.
because people in farms are exposed to more microbes and diversity and what have you.
Yeah.
Although I'm not a science biologist, so don't hold me to that. But like in terms of even just with anything, especially with people, it's like having a wide range of sample set in various scenarios. That is just so invaluable because that's the only real way to know and understand, as long as you're paying attention. Because
Yeah.
I've also seen people who it just all these situations fly over their head, and then when something does happen, even though they've had experience of it, they're still shocked at like how something in a particular situation can occur.
Yeah.
Like for me, although again, in the art world, not so much, but prior to that, I used to work in sales for like over a decade. So
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if I've easily clocked in like my 10,000 hours, quote unquote, of talking to people and meeting various people. And it's not just like
Oh, yeah.
people who are like minded. Like, although in the art world, obviously not everyone's like minded, there's still that common thread of creativity and wanting to create something. And
Yep.
even a lot of people understanding, like, okay, what that is and how people can, the characteristics behind it. But like, you everyday Joes, and from people who are the most nicest people you ever come across to some of the most, like, to put it politely, the most disgusting, depraved people you'll ever meet as well. And,
Right.
like literally seeing the full spectrum, the full gamut of what people can be.
Yep.
And, it does, yeah, you're completely right. Just a long way of basically agreeing with you is that, yeah, like being in different situations can really help in how you communicate, or even just like gauge and assess a situation, especially amongst people.
Yeah.
And that's calling back to what you just mentioned before with the art director when they pulled you to one side. It's
Yeah.
like that could have easily become just a head-to-head match of two people just trying to like maybe fight with one another to get a particular point across.
Yeah.
And I've also seen that happen where it just can be just for the sake of getting a point across and no other benefit after that. But
Yeah.
then like, mentioning, putting it into different perspective to like say, is this the right way forward? Is like perhaps, I guess, like a more diplomatic approach
Yeah.
can be quite wise. So yeah, I totally concur with you on that. And but now with the pandemic and everything, with a lot more remote work, and you've been, of those 8 years, how long have you freelanced anyway?
I think so far, I think I've been doing it. I did it for 1 year, like between maybe like year 4 and year 5, something like that. But I've been freelancing for the past 2 years,
And
actually.
has most of that been remote, or has that been in studio, or a mixture?
No, it's 100% remote. Yeah,
Okay,
100%
so
remote.
you pretty much had the experience, and full well like what remote work's like and working for yourself.
Yes.
And like even with the pandemic now, that's gonna increase exponentially, even when things do open back up, if they do to a full extent.
Yep.
I think it's pretty much like nailed it down that working remotely is a very feasible option for a lot of companies that perhaps wouldn't do it so much before.
Yeah.
But do you think that's changed? Like, do you have to kind of start from scratch in terms of having to like figure out how to communicate with people, or is it still the same?
No, well, I think for me personally, and just kind of my experience, I actually find talking face to face a lot easier.
Same.
So I think when you're talking face to face, not only are you more clear, but you're also a little more careful, right? And I think because there's always the threat of a full confrontation, or even, I mean, I don't think people are going to fist fight in an office space, but there's always that risk,
Right.
right? And there's also less room for misunderstanding.
I agree. Yeah.
And yes, right? Because like if I were to say something that could be a little bit more, let's say it's like a straight edge, and maybe somebody reading that in an email would be like, well, why are you so rude? But if I were to say it in a way that is actually very sincere, or it's just my concern, then they might take it a completely different way, and they will respond completely differently.
100%
Right. And
agree. Yeah.
I've had situations before where I would get into almost like a just an argument with like a art director or whatever, and then they'd be, oh, let's just have a meeting. And then it's like, okay, sure, have a meeting. And then you're kind of like, oh man, like what if I have to like verbally defend myself
Yeah.
and my ideas? And then you go in there and you just realize like, oh, like both parties are coming in probably thinking the same thing. But then
Mhm.
once you like face to face, you're both chill. And you're like, oh, okay, like you're laughing. Yeah, some people call it, it's a little fake, it's a little political. It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the whole like email and messaging thing can be pretty tough.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
still struggle with it. I don't think I'll ever get used to it. Purely because, and I think it's maybe coming from like I said, a long time of working in a face to face environment, speaking with people face to face, like you mentioned, mannerisms and just being in the same space with people, that there's so much communication without words,
Yeah.
and like context is everything. And you know, the same sentence said in 10 different ways can lead to 10 different reactions.
Yeah.
So I do miss that side of things. And you know, like, I still struggle with like just basic emails and communication. Just like sometimes I spend a way too long trying to figure out, like, is this, especially when it's someone like I'm not familiar with, or
Yeah.
trying to engage with someone new. It's like, okay, is this the right way? Is this coming across to this, that, and the other? And it's you know, that I don't think I'll ever get used to that. So it'll be I'm very curious to see how communication, because I don't think there will ever be a fix. I know there's video conferencing available, but still not the same, because again, like when there's a delay lag, or you know, like even it's just not the same. Like, you know, you just
It's not the same.
you can't
No.
really gauge things. But that's I guess from the era that we're from, and maybe in the
Yeah.
future, like, you know, the next generation, the two generations after, they'll be, you know, they're used to this kind of way of living and communicating. So
Mm.
you know, just to move off art a little bit, it's like it'd be very interesting to see how that develops and how humanity would communicate going forward. With that, I mean, if you
Yeah.
look at it now, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, no, I was just wondering, like, because you know how, like, for our generation and older, because we grew up in a time where there was no internet, right?
Mhm.
Let alone social media. It came later, so we did get to experience a little bit of life where it's still like books and newspapers
Mhm.
and pen and paper, and then so maybe like in that aspect, we miss the human to human interaction, even if it's just at work, right? You're building friendships, right? You're building just relationships, even with your coworkers, a fellow art, especially like in art jobs. Like you're all artists, and you're probably all into the same thing.
Mhm.
And our industry is so small that if you mention someone's name, everybody knows, and it's a good feeling.
Mhm.
And obviously, right now, because we're all like freelancing and working from home, it's definitely a little bit different, and it does feel weird sometimes. Like, oh man, am I going to be doing like, am I going to sit in this table in front of
Mhm.
my computer for the rest of my life doing this and just kind
Yeah.
of emailing clients? And am I not going to be able to meet the same amount of like coworkers and then people as, you know, in the past 7 years for me?
Yeah.
But then I wonder, like you said, I wanted the next generation will feel it as strongly. If you're used, let's say you grow up and you're used to like hang out with your iPad and
Yeah.
FaceTiming your friends instead of hanging out with your friend, you're FaceTiming your friends, you're Zoom calling your teachers. It just becomes like the way of life, right?
Mhm.
I wonder if they'll feel it. Maybe
Yeah, and
not.
exactly. And you know, maybe it's when we were younger, it's like you used to think the older generations are so out of touch, and how can they not get it? And now I'm
Yeah.
kind of realizing that how an older generation might not get the next generation, because you know, like they've not been exposed to the same things or the same experiences, or even developed in a particular way.
Yeah.
Um, that that one generation hasn't. You know, maybe like, again, veering away from art completely now. Maybe like throughout the ages, that explains a lot of differences in terms of like, you know, like when ages change, like, you know, like different civilizations would behave one way, then it completely changes, and all these different things that happen. So
Yeah.
it is quite interesting. And me personally, it's like, if I could choose, I'd always love to work physically, like, you know, with in this like studio environment with people. I love that camaraderie that you can have, you know, when you're just working on something and having people there, and you know, like the jokes and laughs that you can have. But then on the flip side, from a personal standpoint, working remotely, working from home, being in charge of my own schedule, that is at the moment has more value than the other thing that I just mentioned right now.
Sure, especially when you have a kid, right? Like
Yeah,
you need the time.
exactly. And like, I just imagine now, although I'm working perhaps more, like it is literally 7-day weeks, whereas, if you're in studio, you're probably only working 5 unless you got to do overtime, what have you. Um,
Yeah,
excuse me. But like when it comes to schooling and all that kind of stuff, it makes everything so rigid. And one thing I like with, I guess you can call it the new age of how the world will be now, because things are going to change whether we like it or not going forward, is that whether people like it or not, there is maybe a bit more nuance and a bit more flexibility that you can have with how things are done. I mean, like, stuff that I'll do for Learnsquared, one of the advantages is there's like an 8-hour time difference.
yeah,
So, like normally when they wake up in the morning, if they're relying on me for something, it's most of the time done. As opposed to perhaps, like having on the same time zone, and then, there's all that the pressure that can happen when things are not done on time and what have you.
right.
But
Gives you an
like,
excuse.
yeah, yeah. But like, but back to just, I guess, like routines and all that kind of stuff is that it's like, with things changing now going forward, is there anything that you love to see more of, and stuff that perhaps, and you kind of touched upon it as well in terms of, like being with people and working with them that in
Yeah.
the physical space, like, are the things you're going to miss?
Yeah. Okay. You know what? I actually did this little experiment because I was in a very, I guess you could say, a very privileged situation a few years ago, right?
Mhm.
Where I was working for Out Studios and I was like full time.
Yeah.
And I think that's when Microsoft approached me and I was like, I really don't have any time.
Mm.
And they're like, oh, please just do some freelance work for us. I'm like, okay, fine. Like, I know the artist there. It's all good.
Mm.
And then eventually it went into like, can you come into work? And I was like, you know what? I will do one day. So I'll do 4 day at Oat Studios and I'll do one day um, at Microsoft. So then because I started out that way where like they were giving me so much freedom,
Mhm.
because usually if you apply for a job and you have no job currently, then they're like, oh yes, come in 5 days. Like you're like, sure, fine, whatever. That's
Mm.
kind of what's expected of you. But because I started that way, I had a lot of negotiation room. So then eventually when my job at Oat Studios ended, mm, they were like, oh, why don't you just come in more? So then I was able to actually experiment like how much more is good for me
Mm.
personally. And I know that I've worked with people who they will love to be there like in office with other people. And I've also met people who they really just want to be at home and they don't want to really talk to you and they just want to do their work and it's
Mhm.
fine. Like that's just it's all personal. So then for me, I experimented with one day. I went in for 4 weeks before. I've done like 3 days and 2 days at home. And then that was like the perfect balance for me was
Mhm.
I would go 3 days in the studio and then 2 days or 4 days at home freelancing or doing what remote work for them.
Mm.
Because that was like, hey, I get to first of all, I get to use the facility in the studio. I get to go to the gym and stuff. I don't pay for a gym membership, and then I can also chat with and just kind of catch up with all the coworkers and friends that I had there,
Mm.
right? But then once like that, oh, I have to kind of deal with maybe some of the office politics and also commuting to work and all
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
stuff. It's like once that got to a point where I'm getting annoyed, oh, okay, I'm done my 3 days. See you guys next week. And it was awesome. It was really, really good for me. And and it's always like there's a freedom there where it's like there's many, many weeks where I get really bored. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go in on a Thursday. And I already
Mm.
went Monday to Wednesday. I'm gonna go on a Thursday and I'm gonna go on a Friday. And the first thing that they will always say to me is, oh, you're in today. What's going on? Right? Did something happen? Did something bad happen? No, no, nothing bad happened. I just miss you guys. Yeah. So I think going forward, from what I heard in Vancouver is that they're going to probably give a lot of people the choice to work from home
Mm.
nowadays. Like it's up to you. So if that was presented, then I would definitely be like, okay, like if I'm looking for a Vancouver studio, then just let me do like 2 or 3 days in
Mm.
office, and the other half is at home.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah, like I think that would be hopefully the standard going forward, and at least in the art world, I think that may be the case, especially for studio setups that do will probably still operate in studio, because there might be some studios, huge ones, let alone Indian smaller ones that might never go back to a studio. Like they're working remotely, and to be fair, like it's been almost 12 months where people have been able to properly stress test it now to see whether it's only good temporarily, only good forever. So yeah, I think it's at least for freelancers, there might be a good mixture of both, where they'll be like, hey, come in if you can, and work from home if you can or need to. And like, at least from my own research, it seemed that just in work life in general, because personally going into work, I've always hated the commute, especially my commute in my last job wasn't that long. It was probably about an hour there and back, as opposed to in some cases it's been an hour there and an hour back or more.
Right.
But like when you got other things to do, or you got, like we mentioned earlier, goals to achieve, it's just thinking like time does become, especially when you're not getting to do what you want to do, you do get really sensitive of the time that is being quote unquote wasted. And then you start thinking, well, why do we have to come in at a particular time? And like, just have a bit more of a rant. One thing I never like to do in particular, because I used to work shift work a lot, which was great because it's flexible, but it can get quite annoying because your routine's all over the place. And if you've got other things on the side, it just messes up that as well. So sometimes my shift would be like in rush hour, and the commute that I used to have was a packed tram, and it was just one of the worst things ever. So I would literally come into work 2 hours earlier just to avoid that, which again was more time wasted. So you start thinking like, why can't things change? And then there was always talk of changing the work hour, have more flexible time. So some people who want to come in as opposed to a 9 to 5, it could be like 7 to 3 or 8 to 4 or whatever. And then even like in some cases working more remotely from home. And I remember having like, not arguments, but debates with managers. Like even sometimes they would like have meetings. They would command that it had to be physically, like had to physically be there, even if it's your day off. And like, oh yeah, we'll pay you, but what's the point in commuting? Because you're not going to pay me for my commute and the time wasted there, for example, just to get in for that 1 hour meeting.
Right. You pay
like
1 hour, not 8 hours.
Exactly. Why not do it remotely? And there was always a pushback of saying, no, it should be done in person. And we discussed, I guess we answered that already, because, being in person, communicating and all that kind of stuff, it is, at least from us two, it's what we think is better. But then all of a sudden with the pandemic overnight, it's all become remote and people can work from home and all that kind of stuff. But then like, it is, then you got on the other side. I mean, fortunately, artists tend to be probably the best equipped in terms of working from home, because, like all the gear that we need, it does require a certain kind of setup and, like having all the particulars that you want. So I guess when lockdown happened, we were kind of prepped, and when
we're lucky.
Exactly. Yeah. Like we kind of like been prepping for, some of us, the last 10 years, just trying to make sure we got the perfect setup. And, like it was almost heaven saying, oh, I can actually work every day in the space that I feel most comfortable in for some people. And then I saw other friends who, not artists, but in different industries, like being given the most inhumane equipment that are, from my opinion, is like, you have to work on that, and they're giving it to you and all that kind of stuff. And they got these, like putting it on their kitchen worktops and this small dining table that's not really meant to be an office. And,
a lot of it is like, oh, you have to work through like, there's a lot of VPNs to route it back to Australia and then back to Vancouver or LA or whatever. And then so you're forever working in a lagged environment. It's the worst.
Exactly. And like, even now, like for the past year, our internet service provider, I've had like so many blackouts of just having no internet. Like fortunately I have like a backup plan with hotspots and what have you. But nevertheless, that's still, I mean, even a few podcasts ago, like halfway through, my internet just went, and like it took about half an hour just to get everything back up and running. And it was just, that's one downside to all this, like flexible working, because on the equipment side of things, there's so many gremlins that you don't foresee. And yes, you basically become your own IT technician
Yep.
overall. But like technology always answers things, and I guess if that is the norm, then developers and inventors and what have you, they'll be making loads of stuff that would make that easier.
Hopefully, like, so back in office jobs, like if you have any problems, you can just call the IT, right? Sometimes you get like half a day off because IT's like, oh, we'll just go for a walk or something, and we have to take a look at it. But then you're not at the front of the priority list, so then we'll take a look at it when it's done, and then sometimes you just get a day off, and then it's pretty cool that way. In terms of like, they will just take everybody's, they're experts in computers and techs, and they're gonna take care of it for you. But yeah, in here, like, imagine at home you're working for multiple clients and your computer goes down. Like, what do you even do? That's
The IT guy can't even come over unless you're in a hazmat suit. So
yeah.
it's
Yeah, and
difficult.
even if they come over, what do you do? Like, you have to give them your computer. They take it home where they have their equipment. They maybe open it up. It'll take a few days, and then what are you going to say to your clients? Multiple clients, that is. Like, it's
Has anything like that happened to you yet?
No,
Or not
fingers
so much.
crossed.
Fingers crossed. I think I cross my fingers for you as well, dude.
I try to back it up in a cloud like once in a while, just so. Yeah, but I know, like, people sometimes when you crash, you still lose. Even if you're backing up like let's say every week, you're still missing like a week of work. That's a lot.
And it's like, like on I guess more on the financial standpoint, like having to deal with that kind of stuff on your own is more expensive on like the worker's point, because now, whereas before you had an IT guy that would come in, that would take the care of that for your department. Now you got to do that yourself, and even just the time alone can disrupt it, and even the frustration alone can really mess up your flow, and that can lead to reduced quality of work. And then, like, I guess even like, I mean, I wonder how many people have really spent on equipment and buying proper chairs and all that kind of stuff. I mean, most artists kind of know after about maybe a year or two, or even less, like how important having good ergonomics around you is, because there's not one artist I know that hasn't had some kind of ache or pain just from doing art and sitting over a computer desk and all that kind of stuff. But like the person who would never work from home or be stuck at a desk at home, they're still trying to figure all that kind of stuff out. So, like, do you think then it's an advantage for companies now, because a lot of that expense has gone on to the artist and the person they're hiring, and like at the same time, it looks like overall on average, rates will probably come down maybe a little bit, because companies can access pretty much anyone around the world now, whereas in some cases before you had to be in a certain location. So, like, to put a bit of downer on things, do you think maybe there will be a bit of a pinch on profits because of this situation?
Yeah, I think there probably would be. I think like, if your first point, I think there's a lot of companies that are offering an X amount of money, maybe like a monthly allowance, right? It's like, oh, you guys can spend it on, whatever work related. You can get a chair, you can get a mic. I think when my girlfriend was working for EA when the pandemic first started, and then they were like, here's a few $100, everybody get a mic, everybody get a webcam if you want to, right? And then after like a few months, they were like, hey, we've kind of upgraded the package. So then everybody's going to get a one-time, like $600 or $700 check, and you just spend it on whatever you want. Right. And that's, but I think for the company though, at least for now, it seems like most studios, if they haven't had a physical location yet, they are still pushing really hard. Whenever the pandemic is like safe, they're going to do it.
Yeah.
Or like a lot of studios that already exist, I think the rent, the electricity, all of them are still being paid. It's not like the computers and chairs can get refunded. So I think for the company part, I think those equipments are actually just sitting there. So right now, I don't think there's a winner. But I think in the future, I would imagine the rate would get. But then again, I think if you're, let's say, I mean, I don't think Mache's rate was going to get cut. So I guess you have to get as good as that guy. And so I think because like everyone's going to get better and better. I think that the standard for this industry is ridiculously high. I've been browsing our station as we're talking, just kind of looking at what people are doing.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. And it's just crazy, man. Like I can't imagine. I think if I were, when I was starting out, it was like 2009. That's when I was, going to school. If I were looking at a page like this, I might get a little depressed, I think. Like the stand, it's not just sketches. Like I think when you look at a sketch, you're like, oh, really? Like, oh, I know
But
how to draw with a pencil.
are
I can
you are
probably
you are
draw
you
a lot.
judging that based on as a technician in your own right, like as an artist in your own right, trying to level up, or is that how you'd feel in general?
I think more like a technician. I
Mm.
think when you're looking at I guess this is going full circle to our first part of our conversation.
Mhm.
It's like, hey, there's so much options, right? You
Yes,
got your first
yes.
role. You got people who are so good at illustrating humans, and then you got a character like splash art, and then you got these like crazy map painter guys, like and then you got 3D artists that are posting amazing 3D work
Mm.
as well. So like it's really 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 overwhelming. So I think in terms of the rate, I like going down and more competition. I actually think it's already happened.
Mhm.
And okay, let's raise one potentially plus side. I think because everyone's working from home, it'll be harder and harder to find somebody who you can rely on as a producer or a like an art director who maybe they're not maybe like like when you're working face to face, it's easy to keep people in line, and
Mm.
it's easy to make sure that there's no huge ego clashes. No one's going to steal company property and all that. It's a lot
Yes,
easier when you have that whole script. But then when you're when everyone's freelancing, the risk goes a lot higher
yes.
of all those things happening, right? So I think if they were to, if a company were to find someone who, you work together for a few months, for a year, and they really trust you and you've been delivering really good work, I do think that they will hold on to you because, it's just
Mhm.
the lack of, I wouldn't say lack of good characters. I'm sure everybody is good people. Most people are in this industry are good
Mhm.
people. But yeah, I think it's just at the end of the day, you try to make yourself valuable and
Yeah,
hireable, right?
yeah. I think that's definitely true because like on one hand, yes, you've got almost an unlimited supply of people to choose from.
Yep.
With the way productions are, and even just like getting stuff done, time is of the essence, and even just like going through everything, then trying to find the right person, get the contract all set up, especially for someone new to everything, that still adds time. So
Yeah.
going with somebody can technically be on a like financial standpoint cheaper because all that time is already saved. You know what you're
Yes.
getting and all that kind of stuff. And even then, it's like with this technical thing is obviously very, very important. Probably the most important thing, like being actually good at what you do. That
Yeah.
there's no point in doing it if you're not trying to work on that and being good at what you do. Because you wouldn't hire somebody to do plumbing who doesn't know anything about pipes and shit.
Yeah.
So it's like that's obviously key. But then back to what we were saying before about like how you communicate and reliability and all that kind of stuff. Like that's super valuable for clients, I guess, because they know that okay, we can get this guy, we'll get the job done, and we know it can work, and it has worked before.
Yep.
So yeah, you're right. So advice to somebody who's trying to break in. Would you say
But
then?
I say one more point on that.
Yes, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I also want to like for most companies that are hiring right now, like internet games. I'm not sure about film. Film might be doing really badly, but games are also making more money.
Yes.
Right. It's not, I think it's so much more beneficial, let's say for someone like Riot to just release a skin and then make millions and millions of dollars from that one skin
Yeah.
versus trying to cut, an artist's salary by like 20 grand a year.
Mhm.
Like it just doesn't make sense for them to do
Yeah.
that.
True.
Anyway,
True.
I just wanted to say that.
Oh
Sorry.
no, no. Yeah. There you go. So it's like, for someone starting out, like obviously it's a given that you should be practicing your craft, and even if you're at a good level, still push it because on one hand I personally think it's just good for you in general just to push your
Yeah.
craft, because this is one of those things that look how it's evolved in your 8 years, look how it's evolved from the beginning to now, just in terms of your own journey,
Yeah.
let alone what's happened around you. um and then, like, what about the other side? Like, what else would you say people should really work on They have got their
Uh,
job, they have got their foot in the door. To ensure that they get rehired again, what
yeah.
should people really focus on to ensure that happens?
Um, I would say once your foot's in the door, you personally, I think you should probably try to be the expert of your like you want to be known for something, right? You want to be known to be the 3D mech guy, or you want to be known to be like the realistic, really illustrative keyframe person, right?
Mhm.
Or you're a really good creature designer. I think that's probably from what I've seen, like that's how people would move up really quickly in this
Right.
business. Yeah, and like I said, like in the very beginning, it's if you were to fall into the process of kind of learning everything and then trying to go through every process, it would take you can probably get there, but I'm just saying it would take a lot longer.
Mm.
And like you want to be known as the only guy that can do this one thing, and we'll pay you a lot of money to do it.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think my when you're first starting out, man, it's a lot. It's really easy. Like I did it as well, where you get the job and you're like, oh my god, I actually didn't even imagine I could work in games and films.
Mm. Yeah.
So you kind of relax. Like you're like, you know what, I'm gonna do my 9 to 5. I'm going to relax. I'm going to start playing a lot of video games, and I'm going to start doing, and which is fair. Like you do need to live, but just try to everything in moderation, because I think you will find that like I've worked for so many studios, and then there's clear personality and kind of like a life choice divergence where you can see where people are moving from job to job and they're
Hmm.
pushing themselves a lot. And of course, there are people who stay at a job and they push themselves a lot, but there's clearly people who artists. I'll just put artists. Like there's artists who they've maybe it's their first job or second job, so then they've kind of sat there for a decade or two, and then they've kind of lost it. They lost the drive.
Hmm.
They've given into how comfortable it is to work at a studio, and especially games. I think game studios are compared to film is relatively low stress
Hmm.
for the art side, right? So then yeah, it. But at the end of the day, though, it really be mindful of like where do you want to go,
Yeah.
not just as an artist, but as a person. Like if as a person your goal is to be the best artist in this industry, then your action has to match that goal,
Yeah.
right? But if your goal is I want to live a very relaxed life where I have time to experience different cultures and different places. I want different people. Or maybe you're in your 20s and right now I just want to focus on dating. I want to date a
Hmm.
lot, or I want to experience all the food. I want to learn other stuff. Yeah, go ahead if that is your goal.
Mm.
That like your goal has to match your action for it to come true.
You actually touched on a good point there. It's like goals is, like, I guess there's always plural for many people, and I guess maybe for everybody, although technically it's perhaps better when you have one because it's something you can focus on and really hone in on. Um,
Yeah,
but like you mentioned, like people somewhere in their 20s, younger, even older, I guess it changes. I know for myself, it kind of has changed and kind of hasn't, but the path along the way there has definitely not been straightforward. It's been like a zigzag with swirls and loopy loops and all that kind of stuff.
for sure.
Um,
Yeah.
like for yourself, has your goals like fluctuated and have they changed? Like, did you have a different goal or mindset in terms of what you wanted from life, like say in your early 20s or even in the first year of starting out up until now in your eighth year?
Yeah, for sure. I think my goal in the beginning it was very easy, right? It was like I just want to work
Mhm.
for the industry. Like that was when I was in school. I want to work for the industry, or even better, I want to work for the IP that I like. Like back then, it was I loved Halo, I love
Mhm.
Destiny. I'm like, okay, when I can work for them, that'll be awesome, right? And then after you work for a while, maybe the money gets in your head, so you're like, oh man, if I can hit this amount of money, a lot of people will be like, oh, if I can hit like 6 figures in 1 year or
Yeah, yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay, I don't know why, but that's like a milestone for people.
Mhm.
They're like, oh, you hit the milestone 1 year, you're hauling ass, right? You're like, oh, I'm gonna work hard, and then maybe you get better and better, your rate gets higher, so that becomes you don't have to push as hard to achieve that anymore.
Mhm.
And then for me, it all comes down to like, what if I weren't being paid? What would I want to do?
Mm.
right? So then it became for me like maybe 3 years ago. It was like I want to be I want to be this type of illustrator or artist, and I'm my hopefully my the path that I take, the training that I do, and the jobs that I accept is going to help me get closer to that, right? And also on the life part too, it's as I'm getting a little bit older and older, I start to think about stuff like family or like like maybe I should do settling down and buying but maybe I could buy a property somewhere or like
Yeah.
where I'm from, so I can feel like I'm settled down.
Yeah.
Like that would be a goal of mine, right? And it's way less about jobs. It's become way less about money. It's become way less about clients. It's been more about myself, like what type of artist I want to be, what level of art I want to achieve, and then as well as for my own family.
Where did at the beginning, like I said, it's about having a job, and I was in a
Yeah,
similar boat. It was just like I went to uni, and my aim was, although I knew like I wanted to settle down and have a family and what have you, that was almost like a given.
yeah,
It was like I need to get a job and a steady job and just continue, and that never happened. In terms of where I wanted it, but again, it's quite, if you think about it, it's quite a bland goal just to have, because it's like that could literally be anything. Obviously, it was like
anything.
a job as an artist. But even then, it was like I was studying transport design, so it was just like in any quote unquote established company that would pay a salary, and therefore, that's considered steady, and then do whatever else afterwards, right?
Yep.
But then my journey just, like that never happened. But nevertheless, the longer goals, the wider goals were still there, or like the main goal. But like for you, where did that come from? Like just like you mentioned, the more like, I guess like you said, not goals, more like milestones, like getting a job and getting like I said, a 6-figure salary or what have you. Like where did that come from? Would you say it's more like just what we've been all programmed to kind of expect, or was that more something that you intentionally wanted?
I think it's expectation, right? Like it's like
Yeah, of course.
society and family expectation. I mean, people always joke around about how like, Asian parents are like tiger parents or whatever. And my parents are not that bad, but they also have, especially when it comes to art, like, let's just say a lot of people are not approve of such industry. And because back then this wasn't big. Back then, like this is like nowadays, everyone's fine. They were like, oh, okay, yeah, movies and games are making a lot of money. And of course they'll need talents like you guys.
Mm,
But back then it was not like that. So in a sense, you're like, yeah, I have to prove them wrong. Otherwise, what am I going to do? And
mm,
plus, like my family was very, very generous with uh, my education. So they're like, yeah, just go to the school. Well,
mm.
we saved up like 4 years of college for you, so just go to school instead of having me like being weighted down by student debt or anything like that.
Mm,
So then part of me is like, ah, man, like if I don't make it, like wouldn't that be a terrible thing? Because
mm.
I feel like I owe them so much, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think that, and once you get your once I got my first job, um, yeah, my salary didn't move up for a long. In fact, I think my jobs afterwards, like my salary actually went down because it was like it was better jobs, but they paid less.
Mm.
It was jobs I wanted to do, but they pay less. But back then I'm like, you know what, whatever. I'm my early 20s. Like, what's an extra like extra thousands, a few thousands of dollars a year going to do
Yeah.
for me?
Yeah.
I just do what I want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it wasn't until actually, you know what, I have to take the 6-figure salary back because I don't think that's ever been a goal of mine.
Mm.
I always kind of take it as a given, like, oh yeah, like if you work hard enough, eventually you're gonna hit it.
Yeah,
It's
like
not,
exponential,
yeah,
just increase and increase and increase.
yeah, and that it's
Yeah.
not even just for artists. I think it's
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
most professions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and plus, like if we're living in a city like Vancouver, let's say Vancouver, or like I personally, I've lived in LA and I've lived in Singapore,
Yeah.
right? Where like, man, like their apartments are like millions of dollars. So like
Yeah.
when you're looking at when you're looking at $100,000 6-figure salary, you're like, ah, man, it's not it's not too crazy. It's not like
Mm.
back in the days,
Mm.
crazy.
Now, I can relate. Coming from an Indian background, it's almost the same thing. Like,
Yeah,
with expectation and there's like almost a predetermined pathway. Literally, almost all of my friends, and most people that I
Doctors?
know, not so much doctors, but in like in that kind of field, or lawyers,
Okay.
or just that pathway of like, okay, education, degree, salary. Not so much a
Yeah.
job that you love. It's more like get a salary that's solid, and then get married,
Start a family.
kick a
Yeah.
few kids out, and then
Yeah.
like then whatever else after that. Um,
Yeah.
and it's like for me, similar as well. It's like there wasn't that much data back on what you could do art related, so then it
Yeah.
was always like geared towards more either on the engineering side, so like industrial design and things like that, where there's something kind of like a, I guess, a pathway that you could see.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you're right, absolutely. Fast forward to today, now that there's more people doing it, and there's like you can make a very good living off of this. Even if it's like say on the low end spectrum to the high end spectrum, there's still quite a big gap. But nevertheless, you can feed the family off of this kind of job, depending on if things fall in the right place and have the right attitude and what have you. But it's
Yeah.
definitely feasible. And you hear stories of like artists who are more than comfortable financially, and then they're going on to do whatever they want. Um,
Yes.
but nevertheless, and I think what you mentioned before about have taken a bit of a pay cut to do a job that you wanted to do. One thing about this job is there is a lot of fulfillment that can be gained. I feel like
Yeah.
even if it's like say you got to do a few gigs that maybe you don't want to do, but it's like not up your street, but nevertheless you're getting paid. But eventually that there is always that dream client and dream project out there where everything's like exactly what you want to do and you get to contribute and things work, and that's always still on the table. That's never off the table. And then on the flip side, it's like, and I know you mentioned this when we did the mentorships a couple of years back, that
Yeah.
you can these skills, if they're good enough for a company to make an IP and build something, then these same skills can be used on something of your own. And you look in the past at iconic projects like Lord of the Rings, Akira, even Star Wars. Those were people who took what they knew of a skill set and an industry and built something themselves. And
Yep.
like fast forward to today, you could easily say I would even take like a percent of that and perhaps feel fulfilled if I achieve that in a lifetime.
Yeah.
So like touching upon that, what are your goals now in terms of as an artist, as a professional, and I guess
Yeah.
even as a human being?
Um. Hmm. I think as an artist, I don't think it's a secret because I pretty vocal about it. But my favorite artist is Jamie Jones.
Mhm.
So then I'm trying to push my art to his level as much. Maybe it would take me 20 years, but I've tried my best. But he's also improving, so maybe it's an impossible game to catch up to.
Mm.
But it's I have a folder of a lot of works that I like from him as well as other artists,
Mhm.
and it ranges from work they've done when they're my age, when they're younger than me, and currently
Oh
and stuff
wow,
like that. And
nice.
I try to measure that. Like I think one of the very dangerous thing I used to do is I measure my current where I'm at with where they're at,
Mm.
for forgetting that hey they started like 10 years before me or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
I don't know his age, but yeah, that's one thing I try to be mindful. It's everybody takes different journey, and just because somebody had a really fast fast tracked career in the first 10 years of their life doesn't mean that it's going to go on forever. Like
Yes.
people have life circumstances, they change,
Mhm.
their motivation change, right? So maybe they get to stardom 10 years, in the first 10 years, and then they just take a break and you
Mm.
don't hear from them ever again. It's possible, right? Not that I want it to happen to him. And
Mm.
that's the art side. I don't think I really want to work. There's no work related stuff anymore.
Mm.
But I actually recently I'm actually working on a project currently where he's also on the team. So that's been a
Sick.
big milestone for me personally, where I get to see his stuff before
Anybody
before people
else?
get to see it. Yeah, it was awesome. And it's honestly doesn't feel like, oh, if I'm looking at his stuff before I do my client work, like
Yeah.
it feels like I'm trying too hard to copy him. It's like, no, well, literally trying to follow his references and his art is literally the job now. So it was
Mm.
pretty awesome. Yeah. yeah, and then I think personally, I think you're a few steps ahead of me, right? Because you do have a kid, so I definitely that's
Yeah.
something that a family is something that I do want, and I think right now, like the whole job thing for me is just to get myself to a point where it's financially I'm financially stable enough to be able to kind of have a place instead of just renting one and
Mm.
maybe risking having to be moved out, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And as a like now that we're a year into this pandemic, I do miss hanging out with people and friends. So like
Yeah.
even just a short term goal when this is all over, I want to make time for families and friends and stuff.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like that definitely put things into perspective. And
For
it's
sure.
something
Yeah,
that's been said quite often throughout the past, and like even just family members and just hearing people just mention it, is like, don't take relationships for granted, because you never know basically when it can end. Um,
yeah,
but like with these, like most of my friends and even just family, like it's just been super busy. Everybody with their own things, so everything's like kind of on pause. It's like you pause the computer game, you pick up where you left off.
yeah,
But now all of a sudden the controller's been taken away, and you can't really play it, and
yeah.
it does make you really like miss just being like we mentioned, of being in people's company and just hanging out with friends, and like moving away, like you said, like you took a step back from social media at least,
Yeah.
just to like have a bit of a breather on that. And then what about personal art as well? Like, was that something that you took a step back on as well?
Yeah. Yes and no. Like I don't want to blame it just on there's on deep inside. I just got lazy
Mm.
for the most part. I lost momentum, and yeah, I don't know. Like it's been just like man, like whatever I'm doing, I'm just not happy with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then it's just I think it's just part of it. I think whenever I did like I think end of last year I did find some motivation to do a little bit. I released like a bike design.
Yeah, sick. So
And that was me like, oh, I want to do, yeah, I want to learn Moy 3D. Like it's a really cool software.
yeah.
And then, yeah, so that was like a little spark of motivation. I think that was started by Paul's uh, Moy 3D tutorial, I believe.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right.
I think it was that one. Yeah, so then I was like, oh, cool. Like this is awesome. Like this seems super easy to use. So I learned it. But yeah, I'm getting back into it. I think personal work, like even years ago, I was like, oh, personal work is like the key. Like you have to
Mm.
get to do it nonstop, and I stopped for like a year. It's a little embarrassing, but I'll get back
Well,
to into it.
I don't know, man. Like, I think, like, personally thinking about it more, because I had like last year, for example, I did one blast of work,
Yeah,
and that was it.
personal work.
Personal work, yeah.
Okay.
For the most part of the year, a lot of it was just like client stuff and just life in general, and
Yep.
like, obviously the pandemic, although for most artists it made everyone maybe be like busier, um, it did really hamper like just having that flow of like personal work, or even just focusing on personal stuff, or even like developing, like learning new skills and softwares and what have you.
Yep.
But then prior to that, I had like 2019, which was the year we did when Concept Art Hacks came out. I
Yeah.
had like probably, I've still got the folder. I was looking at it today, and shit ton of projects that I thought, oh, yeah, I'm just gonna get that done,
Yeah.
and I'll finish it off, and they're still not done. And like I think about like why was that the case? And then like you mentioned about laziness, and some part of it was that. Some part of it for me was like, I think this could be a great project, and right now, the skills for me are not where I want them to be to do this
Yeah.
justice. So it's like, okay, let be on the back burner a little bit, and then when they
Yeah.
develop and bring them forward. But then you mentioned about laziness. Like, do you think that was almost, in a way, your body or your mind just kind of like telling you to stop for a bit?
Like
Because
a burnout almost.
kind of, or just like a fatigue, burnout, and just like even just a refresher. It's always said that travel, like go traveling and then come back, and like your heart will be crazy. Basically, just get away from your Wacom tablet for a bit, and then
Yeah.
it does help. But perhaps like the more I think about it, the more I notice sometimes is because I used to get burnout. Well, I still do, but still quite regularly. It's not
Yeah.
happened so much because I've been not hardcore on my own personal work as much as I used to. But do you think perhaps for yourself, that's what it was?
I think, well, it's honestly, it's probably a cycle, right? It goes, let's say
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
you're doing
Cycle's a good
personal,
one.
because yeah, my experience is almost exactly the same as yours, where you can go back to my folders and you'd be like, wow, there's that 1 year where you were just going at it.
Mm,
And then all of a sudden, all these folders are like full of like half completed PSD files and 3D files. And then you have all these like references. Like I even have references all collected, like hundreds and hundreds of images. Like, oh, this painting, I'm going to need this. That painting, I'm going to need that.
yeah.
And none of them gets, got to the point where it's done. And then I think it really is just once the momentum is stopped, I think your brain will start to make excuses for
Yes.
yourself
Yeah.
to not do it. And this is amplified by the fact that you have a job. So then your brain will be like, you're already working like 8, 10 hours a
Mm,
day, and you're already improving here and there, making money. It's okay to take some time off.
yeah.
Yeah. And I like to equate it to like even just like exercising, because anyone who's like exercising stuff knows once the momentum is stopped, and then once
Oh,
you kind of
yeah.
break your diet, right? You're like, I'll have pizza. I'm a cheat day, right? I'll have my pizza and my sushi today. And
Dude,
then
I like had like a cheat half a decade. Forget a cheat day.
exactly that half a day could, no, that cheat day could literally go into a decade of
Yeah, man.
of just not following that thing anymore. And then I think I really don't want it to be the same for uh for art, but I
Mm,
think it's the same, probably the same chemicals in your brain at
true.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's true because like art, if you look at it like biologically, it's not like a survival instinct that we've had to evolve over the years.
yeah,
So, I'm sure it taps into those kind of mechanisms that are meant for that. Um, and before we touch upon your course, your Learnsquared
yeah,
course,
yeah,
I remember you were talking about like, and you mentioned it a couple times in the episode as well so far, is working on your own IP. And you actually
yeah.
like, on your art station, it's not only artist, but IP developer as well.
Yes.
Um, how has that journey been? And I guess it's very similar to, I guess like a journey within a journey, right? Like making an
Yep.
IP. How has that been?
Yep.
And do you want to reveal anything about it yet?
Sure. I can talk generally about it.
Yeah.
I think I've talked about how I'm trying to make a book, because I think that's one of the easiest way for an artist to, I guess, grow beyond this career. And as an artist, you work for a few years and you kind of realize that you have a few paths. And one of the paths that most people would take, if you're lucky, actually, is to keep on getting clients.
Mm,
And you get clients until you basically decide you want to retire. Right. And I, at the time, I was like, you know what? Like, I'm not sure if that's what I want, because of the experiences I had with clients and projects just not going forward. I just didn't want to put too much of my own like personal satisfaction and my sense of self into client projects too much.
mm,
Versus in the beginning, I definitely did that, and you kind of get burned a few times, right? So then, I decided to start it and be like, hopefully, you know what? Like, if it takes off, I think personal projects that's big to a point where it's an IP. Maybe it's a book. Some people like to do short films, right?
mhm.
Or music, whatever it is. It's hard enough to finish something like that. So
Yes.
if, let's say, if one day in 3 years, 2 years, if I can finish it, I have a complete book or something, I will be very happy with myself already. Like, hey,
Mm,
good job. And if there's any bonuses where it's like a studio was willing to look at it and pick it up and be like, you know what, we want to make this into a show or whatever, that'll be great. That'll be my ultimate dream, because
yeah.
then that will mean that hopefully the income, I don't have to imagine working for clients for 30 years, 30 more years.
Mm.
And I think are you aware of Webtoons?
No.
Okay, so this is something that I've learned recently as well. It's, how like in the Western culture we have comics, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And then in Asian, especially Japanese culture, they have mangas, and it's basically just comic books. But now that there's a new form of, I guess you could say it's comic, and it's mainly comics for independent creators,
yeah,
and they're called webtoons, and it's actually really big, and really popular. And you can tell, like, there's definitely different tiers, whereas like you can go on and be okay, the webtoons.com, or just Google webtoons, and the art, like, standard, it's the range is huge. Like, it
yeah,
goes from something that's completely amateur to they actually hire professional illustrator to
yeah,
illustrate
yeah.
stories. Yeah, and then the thing with a lot of these projects is that they get a lot of the Netflix. Like, if you look at a lot of the Korean, Japanese movies
Mm-hmm.
and TV shows, a lot of them are adopted from webtoons.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I guess the only biggest difference between webtoons and a traditional comic is that webtoon is the framing is designed to be scrolled on a phone.
Right.
So then
Okay.
it's only one frame. It's one square frame, and you keep on scrolling down. Versus in traditional comic, you have, one page might have 4 or 5 different frames
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
various sizes,
Interesting.
right? And now that kind of got me thinking, like, wow, like, there's a lot of people who I don't know how much they get. The studios will pay them to adopt their IP into a show, but in a way, they've achieved what I want to achieve. It's
Mm.
getting your IP out there, getting your story out there, and then having a studio pick it up, and now people enjoy your creation.
Well, that's interesting thing about like your own creation as well. Like you mentioned, just the way the world is, that there has to be some kind of unless you got that Elon Musk money, you have to have some kind
Yeah,
of like financial reward just to keep things ticking over,
yeah,
because like as much as it is a passion, life means that just things have to be paid for. Nothing does come for free. um
no,
and like on one hand that's great, but then on the other hand it is another fulfillment, because it's like completing that one thing and then getting it out there, and then if someone picks it up, that's pretty cool. And I'm just on it right now, and it is cool that there's this avenue that is out there now, because like maybe it's back to what we were talking about before, like how the world is changing and there seems to be more and more outlets now.
yeah,
Like whereas before for films, there used to be your usual studio setup and the different layers you had to get through just to even get something started.
yeah,
Versus to maybe how things did accelerate with like the Netflixes of the world now. But then even before, like I remember when I properly started to put all my eggs in the let's be a professional artist basket, which was about 5 years
yeah,
ago.
yeah,
I remember a lot of advice. That's when obviously you had like, like FCD, Feng doing his web YouTube, and then Level Up and all these other different artists coming on giving their advice.
yeah,
And one of the things that did worry me initially was because like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm putting everything in there, but there's a lot of competition, which is fine, because one thing I did reason with was that there's other industries that have way more competition. Yet some people can be quite successful. Like you look at, I guess, the literary world. You look at acting. Like there's like way more, I guess, actors than there are people on ArtStation across the
yeah,
world. I have no numbers
yeah,
to back that up. I could be wrong. But yet there's some people that still get gigs. They get that series that pays them, X amount per episode, or they get that film or what have you.
right.
So there are
They're set for
opportunities.
life. They're set for life type of money.
Yeah, and like
Yeah,
even other industries like like cooking, culinary arts. Like you want to be a chef. There's many levels to it. You can just be someone who makes a living, and it's like something that's like a regular like takeaway joint, or it could be like
yeah,
Michelin starred, and again you can still make a living on all of those. So that was my weird way of like comforting myself, thinking that you can still make it. Don't know what level, but you can still make it. But
yeah.
then nevertheless, there was always that thing about competition. Like, there's more artists, there's less work out there.
Yes.
But then I did come to the conclusion that perhaps when people say that, it's more in reference to on the AAA side of things. Like, your high level stuff like James Cameron's only going to hire X amount of artists. Same with, like Lucasfilm, and then EA and Bungie and all these other guys were going to do the same.
Yeah.
But then as a result, that doesn't mean work has been deleted, because there's like that pool, that ecosystem of artists out there. you've been experienced this as well with Neil Blomkamp with Alt Studios. Like that was somebody who did things their own way, and Webtoons is a similar thing, and everything else as well. So, like I guess maybe before, and I'm speaking and paraphrasing everybody because I'm just assuming that's what everyone thought, because that's what I thought. Like growing up, you thought making your own IP was the last thing you did in your career. Like you just thought you do your job, you earn your stripes, and then you start making your own thing and retire. But now, and same with yourself, and even like Ben Morrow's got Huxley out, and there's loads of other things out there. You can do an IP from the beginning. Obviously, there's like, to make it good, you want to give it the time and everything and level up. But you know, I guess there's no time like the present to work on your IP simultaneously to your career, perhaps.
Yeah, you know what I think? Well, what Ben's been doing is pretty crazy. Like, just a one-man army producing that, that much work. It's actually really eye-opening. It's actually quite inspiring. I really want to see. I want the best things to happen to him. I mean, I think I owe him quite a lot as well. Like in my education, my school days, and it's like guys like him will show us the way, I guess. I think it's. I would say this, like as hard as creating an IP is, the truth is that most of it, even if you finish it, it's still not going to bring you financial success.
Yes.
Right. Like even like how many books are in a bookstore that you're never going to pick up, and you don't even have any.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, and then it's really difficult because even if you think about let's say something as popular as a Star Wars franchise, and then how many people actually go and buy the Star Wars art book? And now you think about you yourself and you want to make an art book of your own IP. Like how many people are actually going to be interested?
Yes.
Right. So it's a very, very tricky thing. But you're absolutely right though. I think I never thought about it that way, where when you're starting out, especially when you're younger, you never think about an IP. What are you talking about? Like getting a job and paying my bills is the only thing that you want.
Yeah.
I wonder why though. I wonder why like a lot of artists, if not most of them, work for an X amount of time and they all reach almost a similar conclusion. I think there's right. Like there's part of it. I think part of it is that we put in quite a lot of ourselves into our art, and then we can't help it but to put it into our professional work as well. But then when you get reminded that those work are not for you, those are for your clients, I think that drive to be like, you know what, I want to make something that's just mine. I think that drives our, gets stronger and stronger.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of that realization of like, okay, maybe for, again, I'm just putting myself in someone who's been in the game for like, decades or more. Like they've seen the things being created and it's kind of like repetitive or it's over and over again. And yeah, they have this idea and they're at a high level and they can create it. On the other hand, I also believe that it's again going full circle to perhaps where I believe nearly every artist started from, which is from the childhood. Like at the beginning, you make stuff because you want to make it and because you can. And it's like there is no reward when you're a kid other than the enjoyment of making it. And like maybe the financial side of things, and I guess like the grown-up side of life, where you gotta like tick certain boxes and things. Like get time, it's all about time, right? And if it does take time and there's no gain from it, then it is considered pointless. Which I guess like if you've got a family to feed and responsibilities and all that kind of stuff, it is. But if you are able to balance your whole setup where you can make that, like it's and I guess it's like back to personal art. There is like, what is the point of doing it? Yes, there's a point because you can level up that way, you can try new skills, but there's just that enjoyment of having that freedom of expressing what you want. And like, and maybe it's also the age of content creators. Like my eldest is 6, and when I was growing up, is all about the cartoons or the limited cartoons that we put on TV. and the films that would come on once in a while. If you're lucky to tape it on VHS, or you get to look at the TV guide to find out when these films run, and you sit down and watch it. Whereas now that everything's on demand, and the celebrities are not so much the traditional celebrities that we know and love. It's YouTubers, random people that you'd never see, people at home making stuff because they can relate to it. That they're at home making stuff. I have a house, I have a camera, I can make stuff too. So maybe it's like going forward now, we probably would see way more of it, to the point where people are making their own stuff because they can, and tools are getting crazy accessible now. Like Blender's pretty much what Maya was probably about, like in terms of what Maya could achieve 10 years ago, or other 3D softwares, maybe even longer, 20 years ago, where you could make this crazy epic industry standard stuff. You can make industry grade stuff in Blender, and that's free.
And you're by yourself too. Like you don't have a team. You just you.
Yeah, exactly. And again, back to being an artist, it was like, I mean, I don't think maybe people were introduced to it maybe at school, when they had art class or whatever, but like this is something that I guess nearly every artist discovered by themselves. They just gravitated towards it. So I think, and I mean, and I guess like everyone, does have their own idea for an IP, right? And maybe that's what fandom is. It's like, it's just people's idea of what they want something to be. But because they can't make it, they just project it on what they love and they see out there.
I also think art has this interesting thing, and maybe it's also music in a way where like I've been told by like friends and close ones, family, that they can tell when I'm into a piece I'm doing or I'm not.
Nice.
And the piece I'm doing might even be higher quality, and like maybe it's for a client, but it's high quality. Like if I spent a lot more time on it. But then there's certain times where like they'll go, oh, it didn't seem like you're really into that. Oh, that piece, it looks like you're having a lot of fun. And whenever I get a comment like that, I always kind of take a step back and think about like, oh, really? Why is that? Like, was that actually having a lot more fun doing it? Maybe I was. And if I was, why is that? And I think it just comes down to, like you said, like you're trying to bring yourself back to that childlike, almost like an innocence of like, I just want to create, and I don't want to, you don't have to pay me for this. I don't want to get paid. And in fact, I don't want anyone to see it. I just want to do it.
Yes.
And and because obviously we live in the world, we're grown-ups and we live in a world where there's social media. So chances are people will see it, and you can get paid for it. But it's important to detach yourself from that a little bit, and then like try to get back into that state.
How far would you say you're on your IP journey right now? Like, is it kind of gone too far in that there's no point of no return now? Or because it sounds like you got a strategy in terms of like how you might deliver this to the world and the opportunities that could arise from it.
I think it's in my head, it's all done. It's just
nice.
Like, okay, so I think my very initial stoppage point, other than work being busy, was actually that, like, I think you mentioned it, where it's like sometimes you feel like your skill is not enough to execute certain ideas. And for me, it was my character work. It was not there. Like my environment is okay. I can get my point across, but my character work was just pulling down my environment work. And there are certain scenes where I'm like, gosh, it would be really nice if I could like have characters interacting, and it will really, again, like I mentioned, like you look at a Jamie Jones piece, he always has characters.
Yes.
So, and that adds to the story. So then I don't want this book to be, or my IP to be like an art book of environment design. I want it to be a story where each piece it's the same universe, but because of the human interaction, because of the set design, you're able to see, oh, okay, like, you know, like am I like, is that person doing the bad thing? You know, is that person the hero? Like all that questions that would be asked, right? So then, I think I'm definitely working on it, and I'm not sure how long it's gonna take. But yeah, like it was the first stoppage point was that, but I'm getting better and better even at that, like in terms of like characters and stuff like that. So I'm feeling more comfortable with it for sure.
Have you released anything of it yet, or is it still? under wraps?
Yeah, like in the beginning, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, where I was doing a lot of personal work, I was releasing like maybe I released like 5 or 6 pieces where I was testing out like, hey, like what about this IP? What about that IP?
Right,
And then
right.
yeah. So then that was like that was the last time I really like touched it publicly, I guess.
And we touched upon like having to develop skills.
Yeah.
And obviously a great way for that is just taking classes. And
Yes.
for yourself, your journey was you've gone from being a student
Yes.
to being a teacher. And
Yes.
like I'm sure you agree with artists, once a student, always a student, because there's always
Always.
something infinite to
Yeah.
learn. But teaching is like, and I can only imagine what it's like in terms of like changing how you approach your work.
Yep.
But like, obviously, you teach concept art hacks at Learnsquared.
Yep.
It's a course that I took, and one of the reasons why I took it was not because I'm a fan of your work and I just loved what you were teaching in there, but mostly it was because at that point in time, it just felt like how my work looked and what you were teaching is what I wanted.
Hmm.
Have you ever seen the show Heroes back in the day?
Uh, is it what
Say
kind of
the
show? Because
cheap.
I
There's like it's basically like X-Men but without X-Men.
okay,
Um,
no.
there's a character in there, and all he does is go around stealing all the other superheroes' powers by cutting the head open.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I wanted to do with the course, but obviously in a much more gentle way. Um, but like like basically, I wanted to learn that kind of skill, that kind of
Yeah.
like technique, and in terms of my workflow, it is very hack-ish in terms of like it was a mixture of 3D, 2D, trying to
Yeah.
blend it all together, and
Yeah.
you see as like but just to go off a bit of a tangent a little bit, before I even discovered Learnsquared, I was not involved or aware of the art world, the concept art world in particular. So I had no
Okay.
idea of anybody. Um, so I always saw the courses blind, like I didn't have that attachment to a artist. So I'd see like, okay,
I see what you mean. I see
I
what you
want to
mean.
learn this. This looks like what I want. And although with yourself, I was definitely aware of you.
Yeah.
I can see like as somebody who's not aware of anything or wants to get into art in general, like what the course can actually bring to them. So what was it like for you, A, being a teacher, and then
Hmm.
B, like developing that course?
Okay. So that course is super. It was really really rewarding for the most part, and in every sense of the word, right? And I think when I first was approached, I think everybody in today's world, like an artist in today's world, when you get approached to do a course, the first thing that I'm sure most people would think about is like, there are so much content out there already.
Mm.
And what is there anything that I can even offer that is not already out there? And I think I struggled on that question maybe with Momo when just talking about it for a few months actually, and we just don't know what to do. And then eventually we did come to the point where like, you know what, why don't you just show off that the process where like I'm the most confident in that I've been working on, like this environment design process I've been using for the past few years and it's gotten me, good jobs. So maybe I'm comfortable showing that. And part of that is also, I want to make sure that this process I understand enough. Like, because when you're trying to explain things to people, you have to stop yourself from thinking in your muscle language
Mhm.
and whatever your habits you have. You have to be like, I'm doing this because this, and I'm pressing this button because I want to achieve that. And that's actually very beneficial. Like it almost makes this, you're the teacher that's also the student because I'm also learning from my past self. Like I'm
Mm.
like, okay, like, I have to remember, like I'm not taking everything for granted anymore. And then once that course was done, what I wanted to do was say, hey, this is the process that I'm using. There you go. Like 100%. Anybody who wants to take it, anybody who wants to learn from it can have it.
Mhm.
And I'm going to move on and develop and work on other work processes.
Mhm.
I'm not going to rely on that one anymore. And that
Mm.
was my initial goal. Yeah.
And
It's just cool though. It was an awesome experience.
now, like, because it's interesting, like at face value, and I've discovered this like going back on other courses as well. It's like
Yeah.
it's like a great film. When you go back, you always see something that you thought you never saw before. even though you watch it like 100 times.
Right.
And like with the course phase, like, okay, cool. And it's accessible because it's, it's easy to break down. You got your sketching phase, you got your value paintings, and then you bring it all together. But then what I really liked about it is that it just gets straight to the point in terms of like, so I could easily apply it straight to my work. And even when we did the mentorship, which I super enjoyed, by the way, and still like seeing everyone's work with developing afterwards, is just still phenomenal to see. Like everyone's just killing it.
It's crazy. I've seen like some of the students, they'll post stuff like, oh, I worked for this client, that client. I'm like, holy moly. I haven't talked to you guys for like a year and you're advancing better than me.
Dude, it's like, and no, like even and I've only been at Learnsquared, like working here for about, this is approaching, the summer will be my 3rd year. And even then just seeing like the journey students take from a course and then what they do with it, it's just amazing because, it's like, again, what I love with the courses, like seeing students work. And even like on the mentorship, if you looked at every single, I think on our, because you did it twice, on our one, there's like, I think 10 individuals. No 2 pieces were the same. And no 2 pieces were the same voice and the same, like trying to show the same thing. And I think that's a great testament to a great course, is because you can take, this is from one brain, from your mind, right? But then, that knowledge has been taken and interpreted all these different ways. And that, for me, is like great to see, just as an enjoyer of art. But like, even just as a professional, it's just cool to see that with knowledge, even though like in theory, let's look at it a strategic point of view. Anyone who takes the same course as you is your competitor, because they learn the same skills. But nevertheless, if the fact that every competitor is going to take it a different way, you can still forge your own path, right?
100%.
But yeah, man, like with the course and seeing what people do with it, it's just been phenomenal. And even like just the work, like every now and again we would see someone do some stuff, and obviously we promote it. And there's always something that people have done that you never expected, even though it's like, oh, I can tell straight away that's a concept like hacks homework. But it's still like cool. I want it's like I guess a genre of film, right? Like when you watch a sci-fi film or a horror film, you kind of know what you're gonna get, but at the same time you don't. And the great ones always surprise you.
For sure.
And that's like my take on what I see with students from the course. But
that's actually one of my main goal in the beginning of making that course as well. It's where like I want to break down the process to a point where, yes, if you're more of a beginner in this painting or concept art journey, and you are probably going to take the course and you're probably going to try to replicate what I'm showing you. Right. And that's a given, because I did that. I still do that. And most people I know do that. But I think the knowledge I want to give out is you can think back like 3 years from after taking the course, be like, oh, that's what he was talking about when he says you can blend the edges and then you can separate your edges from soft to light, and then you pick your brush accordingly. Right. And then maybe it's something that you don't understand at the time, and you're just blindly trying to copy the exact, things that I'm trying to do. But then because that information is already in your head, when you do have enough experience and skill set to think about that, you will completely take your work to just a different level that's completely different from mine, and probably better. And that was one of the main goal too.
You definitely nailed it, and it's definitely been a success. And that's just speaking personally with my work. And again, back to what you were saying before, like those unreleased projects, there's a bunch that I've been developing since taking that course that I really want to get right before I release it, just because of what I learned in this course and on the mentorship, is that take your time to get it right and apply everything you learned to get it right, just to make sure that project is given the best, like the best effort, because it's like, there's no point in just releasing something for the sake of releasing it, unless that's your goal, unless you just want to be, like that's what your journey is about, which is fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I gained like loads of super valuable knowledge, and even stuff I'm working on now. Like you just mentioned, I still get those moments like, oh, that's what Steve meant. That's what he's trying to
Right.
do. And even though
Right.
you see it over and over again, it's still like you ask yourself, oh, what would Swang do? Okay, yeah, that's what he would do, and then
Right.
you get that done. Regarding your, and it's mentioned before, like I think nearly every instructor goes through that, and yourself as well. It's like you're kind of like putting knowledge out there. It's like a piece of yourself, and you put it out there, and then you move on. What has that journey been like since?
Like after the course was
After,
released.
yeah, after the course, like you've like now you're on that journey of, I guess, leveling up again.
Yeah.
Just to speak for you. But like like what has that been liberating for you? Was it a bit more like maybe anxious because like, okay, what do I do now? Like
Yeah.
because
Yeah. No, for sure.
maybe sorry, but
Because
maybe
like
like,
the
do you think like
oh, right.
maybe sometimes as artists we try to level up when maybe we don't need to, in terms of like you mentioned before, like just stick to a particular craft and really
Mm.
hone that in. Like what's your take on that?
Well, it's like you can either you can cast a really wide net, right? Or you
Mm,
can go really, really deep. And I think when I was doing the course, like I mentioned earlier, it was kind of to get the process out there so I can go and learn something new.
mm,
That like I think we mentioned in the beginning of the podcast where I try to learn different things, and I realized that maybe that's steering me too far away from my goals, or my artistic goals at least,
mhm,
right? So then I reel it back. Maybe like, this time I'm trying to go a little deeper on one subject matter or one workflow.
mm,
Yeah. And seeing, like, when I look at the people who are taking the course and all the work that's being done, it always kind of it's a good reality check for me when
mm,
somebody takes the course and then maybe sometimes down the line they're producing pieces that's clearly taking some technique and some thoughts from the course, but they've pushed it in their own way.
mhm,
And it kind of gives me a reminder, like, oh, okay, like that's what I have to do.
mm,
Yeah. Like, just because I was the one who made the course doesn't mean that doesn't mean I can't, like, I have to be too attached to that.
yes.
Like, where can I push? Like, where can I even push my own technique in that?
And just to, I guess, a note to wrap up the podcast on.
Mm.
Um, 2021, obviously, it's flying by already. I mean, we're approaching March in a couple of weeks.
Yes, flying.
And I thought last year went fast, and it did,
Yeah.
but this year's like even hitting warp speed now. Um, what does this year hold for you? Like, in terms of goals and what you want to achieve. Hopefully, with the pandemic and the vaccines, it can
Mm.
just open up and there's some kind of normality back, at least
Yeah,
on the mental health side, where we can meet people and all that kind of stuff. But
for
yeah,
sure.
where do you see this? How this year progressing? Or how would you like it to?
Okay, so I think in the perfect world, I think I will probably work for a few more months until my contracts are fulfilled,
Mhm.
and then probably try to drop it to like a 2 to 3 day work week for a good while, just to kind of open up some time for me to jump back into the IP and the book and all that stuff, and even just practicing personal stuff. Right. I think that will be very, very, very ideal for me. And then plus it's summer. So then, like, personally, I would like to kind of get into a diet, get back in shape, stuff like
Mm.
that.
Hmm.
Yeah. I started like with my friends I went to school with. We started like a little Discord channel where we post like a silly selfie or maybe like a picture of your feet or something every day, and we attach it to, like, hey, like today I did this, like, oh, I did 30 push-ups, and yeah, and it's been really good. It's been going on for a few weeks, and like, wow, like it's way more motivating
Nice.
to wake up and be like, oh, damn it, 3 people did it. I guess I'll do it today too. And you know what? Maybe I'm missing something like that for art, where it's like I'm looking at it and be like,
Right.
"Oh, you did it. I had to do it too."
Dude, thank you very much. It's been great. I could chat to you for hours,
Yeah,
man. And there's so many things I missed to touch upon, but I'm sure we can do another one soon.
Yeah, no, seriously, I don't mind. And it's always really, really cool to discover, kind of like, like when you're talking with someone, you kind of discover things that you didn't even think about before, which is great. And it's been really fun, man. Thanks a lot.
Huge thanks to Steve for joining me. Please check out his Learnsquared course, Concept Art Hacks, which is available now, and the first lesson is free. So head on over to learnsquared.com and start your journey today. Also give Steve a follow by checking out his links in the description below. And if you're liking the podcast so far, please like, share, and subscribe. And see you next time.